Good morning, everyone. It's Spirit Sessions, A View of the Light. And we're here today on this After Valentine's edition with a half price box of chocolates. And like Forrest Gump said, you never know what you're going to get. And today I woke up and our guest that was scheduled came down with no voice. And she's sick at home. So we're sending big love to Marla Torres. Hopefully you'll heal soon and feel better. And she is rescheduled for April 7th, and we really appreciate you being here. So while I was sitting there thinking this morning, what are we going to do? Teresa and I are just brainstorming, and I said, "Oh, Kathy Moffatt, I'll just ask Kathy if she wants to come. She only lives an hour up the road, and it's a snowy day here in Ontario. Maybe she has nothing to do." And I know she's been working on several interesting projects. And we had her on, I thought it was last year, but it was last September in 2022. So it's time we had her back on anyways. And Kathy, I've known her for a few years now, and she works with horses. And I'll let her introduce herself and tell you what she does and how she works with horses and humans and the interaction and moving through feelings and healing. It's quite an interesting story. And she has started a new series on her farm, Moving Through Grief, and we'll talk a little bit about grief today as well. So please like this show, go to YouTube, share it out, come and join us in, comment on the show, tell us where you're coming from, and catch us later on the podcast and share this out with someone you know who may be moving through grief as well. So welcome, Kathy, and thank you so much again for being part of the show today at Last Minute. We love it. And I'm going to share this out while you're introducing yourself and telling us a little bit of your backstory.
Yeah, so that's, you talk about the serendipity of the moment. And when you messaged me this morning, the snow was coming, and I had a client scheduled for this afternoon. And I thought, oh my goodness, I don't want her driving. She had about an hour and 20-minute drive when it looked like it was going to be a snowstorm. And I thought, oh, maybe that's not such a good idea. And so I messaged her and just concerned for her safety, and thought, wow, not a great day to be working with horses anyway because of the weather. And as I'm doing that, you call me, you message me, and it's like, the universe is conspiring for us to have a conversation today. So I'm delighted to be here. So as Rhonda said, I'm Kathy Moffatt. I have a farm outside of Merrickville, Ontario, Canada. There are 9 horses on the property. Couple of dogs, nature, all sorts of fabulous wildlife here. And what I do here, I practice equine experiential learning and coaching, which is basically a modality where I work with the horses to facilitate experiences with people to enable them to unearth emotions or things that are trapped in their bodies. Horses are just beautiful mirrors and reflections to what's going on with you. They don't talk, and they communicate themselves with their bodies. And so they're masters at reading what's going on with you. And I facilitate these interactions, which are it's really energy work. So the energy of the horse, the energy of the human that's in the horse's presence, and emotions really are stored in our bodies as energy. Well, everything is energy, but emotions for sure hold strong energy. We hold on to them in our bodies, and horses feel that. And if we're not aware of what's going on or don't want to release it, the horses are just magnificent of holding space and reflecting it back to you. So that's the kind of work I do. And I work with all sorts of people from all walks of life. Primarily, I work with adults. I mean, I do work with some mostly adults. And more recently, I've been doing a lot of work with grief. I work very closely with a local hospice. So grief related there is mostly due to bereavement and death, or preparing for death. But grief, of course, encompasses all sorts of loss in life. And I'm finding that work very it's very powerful work, and it's very purposeful work, and it's something that we all face at many, different times in our life, whether it's the death of a loved one, or could be a loss of a job, or an illness, a relationship change. We're all faced with grief, and it's an umbrella emotion that covers other emotions like sadness and anger and frustration, etc. So I feel I've been called to do this work, and the horses are really particularly brilliant at this. And one of the reasons I think so, because horses grieve too. I've seen it when horses have property or horses have died. There is a very obvious grieving process that goes on with horses too. And so their spirits tend to be very tied to the spirits of the other horses around them. And I've witnessed many profound things with the horses, and then of course with the humans that come here as well. So that gives you a synopsis of the work that I do, and kind of the current things that I'm focused on.
Now, when you say the horses work with people, we're not talking about any mounted exercises. The people don't have to have any experience with horses before they come.
No. No, you don't ride them and you don't sit on them. You basically, you're in their presence. So, and you're in their energetic field. So we all produce energy around our bodies. We're energetic beings. And you can look at it from a spiritual point of view, but you can also look at it from a science point of view. So from a science point of view, it's electromagnetic energy, of an energy field around us. That's how we feel other people when they walk into our space. And all animals have it. Mammals in particular, a very strong energetic fields, just because of the biology of their bodies, the size of their hearts, and their digestive systems produce a lot. And so that's what you feel. And you don't need to be on a horse to feel that. I mean, when you're on a horse, you do, for sure, very succinctly, but that's not what we do. You're in the horse's presence, and you're in their energy field. And when you're in their energy field, you feel them and they feel you, right? So, and that's the magic that happens there. And what I do as a facilitator is I facilitate the interaction, and then I notice the behavior of the horse, its body language, other kinds of behaviors. And invariably the human feels things in their body and things come up. It's called experiential learning for a reason. It's hard to talk about. You have to really experience. And I hope I'm doing it justice by the way I'm talking about it, but it is this it's a felt sense, right? It's a somatic felt sense. And that's what we tap into. So you're around them, but not on them.
Yeah, and their energy reaches out to you, and anybody who's had any experience with animals or humans for that matter, can know when people or animals are upset, and animals seem to know when you're upset as well. If you have a cat or a dog or whatever, they seem to sense when there's a problem, or even if you're really excited, they get very excited. So it goes both ways with them. And horses are just so much more sensitive because they're prey animals, right? They're just more aware of their outside, what's going on.
That's right. And so you use the example of a cat. So, I mean, a cat is a predator animal in nature, and but they feel your energy too. I mean, you could be sad and your cat may come and crawl up in your lap and purr at you. And so they're feeling you and they're feeling your emotion, and they're coming to try and comfort you in the way they know how. They're not going to talk to you like a human might come and talk to you if you're not feeling good. But an animal will come and do other things. And dogs too are predators. Horses are prey animals. And so they more attuned to their surroundings because they could be dinner for the mountain lion lurking in the bushes. So they're very attuned to everything that's around them, so they don't get eaten. And so their energetic field is highly sensitive and tuned. Plus, it's highly sensitive and tuned because of its physical size. A horse is a large animal, so the energy field around a horse is bigger. It's just biology than the energy field around a cat. The heart is bigger. Most of the energy comes from your heart, secondly, your gut, and then thirdly, your brain. And this is true for all animals. And it's the same order. The ratios may vary depending on usually the size of the digestive system, which in a horse has a very complex and large digestive system, contributes a lot, and that produces a lot of energy, and it's sensing. So they have horses, because they don't talk, a gut sense and a heart sense about what's going on around them, which says, I feel this over off in the distance over here. It could be danger. And then their gut tells them run. And then they run. So that's the way they're attuned. Whereas a dog or a cat, they're not going to sense things the far away. And their instinct is more to look what's out there and lean into it. What is it before they make a decision? Horses' instinct is in danger, they're typically a flight animal. Right. If they have the ability to run, that's what they do, right? So that's what we're talking about there. And you feel it in humans too, right? So, if your spouse is mad at you, I know if my husband's mad at me, I can feel it across the room. He's walking in, I'm going, oh, what's the matter with him?
What did I do now?
Yeah. Right. And you feel it in your body. It's like, and as I'm talking about it right now, I'm feeling it in that as I'm talking, and that felt sense. What does that feel like? I feel it in my chest. It's like, oh, that's kind of buzzy, tingly feeling, in my chest. So, and we know that. And you can think of lots of examples of that, where you have this felt sense about what's going on with another sentient being. And the more attuned you are to it, the better you are to read into it, right? So the horses teach us, because they're so sensitive, such a large energetic field, they really teach us to attune to it, which is the beauty of this kind of work.
So did you seek out this modality because you used it to heal yourself, or is it sort of an ongoing thing like Reiki, where you get Reiki, you heal others, but at the same time you're healing yourself as you're going through the process of helping others to heal with this?
That's a very good question. I've been involved with horses on our farm for almost 30 years. And I subconsciously, without really knowing anything that I've talked about, I would subconsciously, when I wasn't feeling great, I would go out to the horses. I would go and sit with them. I'd go brush them. I would be in their presence, and I would immediately feel better. They're very grounding. Well, they have 4 feet on the ground, so they're grounded, right? Horses are very grounded. And you feel that when you're around them. And I have many examples of where I would go to it, and I wouldn't even think about it. I would just go. I can specifically remember when my mother died. It was a situation where she was diagnosed very quickly with a stage 4 cancer, but she had a time, but in the end she didn't. So we knew that she was going to die, but we thought we had time, and then she died the next day. It was quite incredible. So it was not, wasn't unexpected, but it wasn't expected in the time frame it happened. And I remember being the shock of going into that, and immediately there was the grief, but I couldn't deal with it because I had to prepare for everything involved with a human being dying, funeral and who to inform, and et cetera, et cetera. So I was doing all of that stuff, and then it was all done. The funeral had ended. There was paperwork, lots of paperwork to do. I was her executor will, and I was doing all this task stuff, and I wasn't dealing with any of the emotions. And then one day I'm just like, oh, I feel like I don't feel great. And I was feeling sad, and I just went out to the horses. And I remember, I even took photos of it. This is how profound a moment it was. I went out and I took a chair and I sat in a field with my horses, and I had this beautiful big black gelding. His name is Quinn. And I'm out there in my pajamas with sandals on. Now, if you're a horse person listening to this, you're going to judge me for wearing inappropriate footwear around horses, but that's what I was wearing. And I was sitting in a chair. I brought this chair out, and I had a cup of coffee, and it was in the morning. I had my phone with me, and he just wanders over to me and just starts to nuzzle me. And then he stiffs my feet, and he proceeds to take the sandal off my foot. That's what I took of him taking the sand and playing with it. And then and it made me laugh, like it was a joyous thing. So he could feel me. He came to see me, and his response to that was, he's mouthy anyway, but he made me smile and laugh, and I let go of the sadness, for a bit, and the feeling of grief, and that's when the grief started to bubble up, and at that point I thought, oh wow, isn't this interesting? I mean, it was interesting enough at the time that I took photos of it, and that was 11 years ago. So, and here we are now. So, yeah. And I have other examples of that. So, would I work with them to heal? Subconsciously, they were very healing. But then, I became more and more curious about it when I was going through some struggles with my children and my youngest son in particular. I would spend a lot of time, with the horses. And then I I started to realize there's really something to this. And then I began to investigate it a little bit further. And then, I mean, it's kind of, there's a story to that, as to how I did that, but, and then did some training and then found out, oh, wow, there's a lot of science behind it, but there's also this felt spiritual sense behind it too. So there's different aspects of it. And then I took a program and studied it quite intensively, and of course I use it for my own healing. I mean, to be very honest, when I was going through the situation with my son, so he, it's a bit of a long story. I'm actually, writing a book about it, but he was homeless, and he was addicted. At the time, he was addicted to meth, and he'd been in and out of jail. We had this 10-year period of a lot of this stuff with him, just horrible, horrific things. And it came to a head when he had gone to got convicted of pretty horrible crimes, and I had to sit through the trial. And when I did that, it was so traumatic to sit and watch your child who, wasn't doing great things, but you're your child, and you just love them, and you're your mother. There's this just strong bond. And I remember sitting through the trial. It was a week. I was there every day, and it was horrible. And I would go out to the horses out of the courthouse, and go home, and I'd go out to the horses, and they would just, comfort me. But at the end of that trial, I realized this isn't good. And I knew at that point in time that I needed some additional help. So I went off and I sought some professional help to deal with the trauma. It's trauma, right? It's trauma. And then when I went and did that, it was like, oh, isn't this interesting? What's going on with me, and how long the horses have been helpful, and they're healing me. They're healing me. And I think I need to do this with other people. I had a succinct moment where I decided to go watch somebody that do the kind of work that I do now. And she was working with this young boy. She invited me to come and see this work. I was investigating it a bit, and I watched her with this severely abused teenage boy working with a horse. And I knew as soon as I saw it, I thought, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. It was like a download from above. It really was. And then I realized that, wow, I'm going to learn more about this. I'm going to take this to other people. And it was also an aha. This is what's kept me sane and probably alive, because at the time that I was going through a lot of that stress with my son, I was drinking a lot. So that wasn't a healthy way of coping. That's a very unhealthy way of coping. And it's like, oh, I can't continue trying to cope like this. So there were these things that all kind of came together. And so they guided me, I truly believe they guided me in that direction. And I discovered what it was about and I knew it was just a knowing. I knew this is what I was supposed to do. And so I investigated it. And then I took a program. I've taken a couple programs actually now, but I took a program back in late 2021 and into 2022 in Equine Experiential learning and coaching. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
So that's the field program, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's the field program. Yeah. So, and it was born out of, so it's field stands for facilitated equine experiential learning. So the name really says a lot. Actually, the acronym makes so much sense because it is a feel. It's a feel. You have to you feel it. The horse feels you, you feel the horse. It's all about feeling. But the acronym describes what it is. It's equine horse experiential. You experience it. It's a physical experience with a horse. It's facilitated, the facilitation. So I safely facilitate the interaction with the horse, and then the learning. It's a learning. So I'm not a therapist. So I'm going to make that very clear. I'm not a therapist. I consider what I do is more like coaching and letting clients become aware of themselves based on the experience and the emotions that tend to come up. And we can heal ourselves. We have everything within our bodies to heal ourselves. I truly, truly believe that. We just don't know how. And emotions and energy within us, if you can release that, it comes to you what you need to do. And that's what it's like. So it's It's a guided coaching practice, really. It's not like talk therapy, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I've gone to talk therapy for sure, and it's fabulous, and this is a compliment to it, because sometimes you don't want to talk about it. Like sometimes with grief, like I have clients with grief, they don't want to talk about, particularly the clients that have horrific grief, like clients that have, I have a couple that have, had partners that have committed suicide. That's horrible. I mean, that's grief that's complex grief with probably PTSD. They don't want to talk about it. How do you release it? Medication, okay, but that just numbs it, right? So you have to flow through the emotion, and that doesn't involve talking. And the beauty of horses and working with horses in their energy field is that they help you release it, and they don't judge it. They have no judgment about whatever's happened, and they don't lie. So they're not telling you what you want to hear. They're feeling it and helping you release it. And it's a total body experience. It's quite, it is profound. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It is really profound.
Yeah. I guess what the horses help do is they don't have you, like sometimes people can't figure out even what they're feeling, right? They can't figure out am I angry? Am I sad? Or all of the above? But I just know I don't feel the way I used to, or I feel like there's some big weight on my chest, and the horses just come in and sort of help release that, and so you can sort of sort out what's going on. Sometimes it's just a big bag of mess, and you can't even figure it out.
Right, and figure it out. So you make, that's a very good point there. So figuring it out involves your mind, right? And what we're talking about is the felt sense that has nothing to do with your mind. It's not figuring out what's going on with me. Your body is what you're tapping into. So when you're with the horses, and I have activities that help people get out of their heads into their bodies. So I facilitate a bit of that. And when you're with the horse and you get out of your head and you're in your body, then these feelings come up, which you don't analyze it. They just come up, and then you know what emotion it is because you feel it. Your body, you could burst into tears. So what emotion is that? Well, that's sadness, right? So I've had people come up, put their hand on a horse and doing a breathing activity to just get out of the head into the body, feel your body, and then they burst into tears. And then all of a sudden sadness comes up, and then sometimes clients will articulate what it is. Oh my God, that's what it is. And it's been stuffed in there. And there wasn't any amount of thinking and talking about it that was going to get them to release it. And the crying is a release. It's a flow, right? You cry, you're flowing it out. Anger. Yeah. I've had people shake, just shakes. And there's this built up anger, and anger, you think about it, there's a tension. How do you release it? You want to shake it out, right? So that happens too. So it's not a thought process. And the horses, that's how they live, right? They don't overthink things. If horses don't really get angry anyway. I mean, they can be fearful, but when they get fearful, here's a good example of how we deal with emotions. In a human mind, okay, we may get fearful. We may decide, okay, maybe we decide to run. Maybe somebody's trying to, we're coming to our car to get into it, and someone's trying to steal our car, and then they're threatening us. Okay, what's our options? We immediately go into our sympathetic nervous system, which is, fight, flight, or freeze, or fawn. There's basically 4, but typically it's in that situation or flight. Probably flight. If they've got a weapon, you run, and then you run away, and then the danger's gone. But as a human, then we ruminate about it. We think about it, and then the next time we go to a car, we think, I don't want that to happen again. You're still thinking about it, and then it's sitting in your body. With a horse, if a mountain lion jumps out of the woods at the horse and they chase, and the horse runs and they have space to run, once the danger is gone, the mountain lion is gone, the horse completely releases it. And they will do things like shake. They'll do other kinds of body languages as well. And then they'll go back to grazing, and then it's gone completely. It's 100% gone.
They're not thinking about it the next morning when they wake up. I wonder where that mountain lion is.
That's right.
They're not thinking
That's
about
right.
it.
And they're not storing the trauma. For the most part, horses don't store trauma. Humans store trauma. I mean, we have PTSD. What is that? Stored trauma, right? So horses don't store it. For the most part, horses that have lived in horrible environments that can't fight or flight. So if a horse wants to, fight or flight, typically, if they're contained and they can't fly, and they're not inclined to fight, like to be aggressive, then they'll freeze. So the freeze response is just they shut down. And so you can get a horse like that. So the trauma has not been released because they're forced to freeze because biologically or there's physical circumstance, they can't run to release it. So then they're frozen. And they can stay like that, but they have to release it at some point. So you will get horses at times that have been in traumatic situations that may have a release, but it comes out eventually. Freeze will typically turn into fight or flight down the road to release it, right? That's how you release it. So whereas humans, a lot of times we don't release it at all. And but the horses being in their presence gets you out of your head into your body, and it's your body that releases it, not your mind. You can't talk yourself out of it. You just think about things, your mind will go this way, that way, this way. You can't talk yourself out of traumatic experience. I don't believe you can. You've got to release it, find a way to release it.
One way or another, and hopefully
One
it's
way
a
or
healthy
another.
way. Yeah, and healthy ways.
And a healthy way.
And healthy way is a lot different. So
yeah.
So talk us a little about, you do have moving through grief workshops coming up, and how would they typically run, or how do they typically move? How does that look like in the day?
Yeah, so I run them as a series, 4 sessions, a week apart, and they're a couple hours a piece. And there's a reason for that. I'll get to that. I'll talk about the logistics first. So there are 4 sessions, about 2 hours, and I do it with a maximum of 4 people. Any more than that, it's much emotion in one room, right? So you need to be cognizant of that. And how it starts is, and doing it in a group, there's a reason for that, because grief is shared, and it is important. So we talk a lot. We're talking about talking in the body. There is a place for talking and sharing. So you have a group of people that are having a grief experience, where it is. Our first session, they tell their story, whatever they want to tell. They don't have to tell everything, whatever they want to tell. They share amongst each other. So we name it. We name what the grief is, and everybody accepts what it is. That's very important. And then we do an activity group with the horses. The activities vary. It depends on the time of year. It depends on the people and their comfort level around, because horses are large animals. So if people are fearful, I may adjust the activity. And then we do a group activity around the horse. In the first session, it's more about understanding the energy of the horse and releasing a little bit of that emotion. It's more of a demonstration of that. And so then they get a little bit of I've relieved something, or I felt something in my body related to my grief. So that would be the first session. Then I send them away, after the first session, with a little bit of homework, to write down some things around their grief, because grief is an umbrella emotion. So things sit under it: sadness, frustration, anger, all sorts of things. So then they'll do a little activity on that. And then when they come back the second time, we'll do a bit of talk about that. And everybody is different. And then we'll do different activities. And we move into the second week, we move into activities where it's one-on-one. So one person with one horse doing a specific activity to design to release something or reflect something that's going on. And then the other participants, while one of them is with the horse, will watch. And so they become aware of what's going on by watching what the individual that's working with the one horse is doing. So, and then they notice things too. Well, I noticed this, I noticed that. So it's very powerful to have a group in that, because you get eyes on the situation. And then we debrief that. And third week, and they get home a little bit of, reflective type homework, a little bit of journaling. And usually the third week, we're really getting into kind of, the nitty gritty of it. And at that time, there are specific horses that really want to work with specific people. The horses they're like me, pick me. Then we'll continue usually a one-on-one, again, a different one designed to release different things. And then at the end of that session, I usually have people come back to their final session, things they want to release. What do I want to release? So these could be things like, and they write them down on little pieces of paper. So I want to release this limiting belief about my grief. So say, for example, maybe your grief is not about somebody that's died. Maybe it's your grief's about you've lost your job. What's my limiting belief about that? I am who I was with my job might be a limiting belief. You write that down. My community believes I am who I am because of my job. You write that down. Nobody will like me because I've lost my job, because I'll lose my circle of work friends. Anything around that, you write all these things down, and then you usually bring a photo of yourself. I always encourage people to bring a photo of themselves as a child when they were 5 or 6. And then we talk to the child and what did the child like to do when they were 5 or 6? This brings out joy and things that we did as children where we were in our bodies, not in our minds. And it gets people to think about things that they might be able to do through their grief that they enjoyed as a child, because these are the things that are our authentic self, right? The things that we enjoy doing before society conditioned us to do it at whatever it is that we have to do, right? I get people to reflect on that. So we do an activity around that and an activity around the horses. And usually the last activity is a release activity where we release whatever our beliefs are. And if it's someone that's died, you know, and the person talks to the horse anything that's been unsaid that I didn't say to you when I was alive, any regrets. And they say that to horse, and then we release it. And so then you love this. It's beautiful. And watching how the horses release it too, because they release it as well. And then we typically, the last session, we have a huge bonfire, and then we burn everybody's limiting beliefs about everything. And so that's typically how it works. So it's 4 sessions, guided, safe and sacred space, whatever happens and says in the group, because things come out and people can share some very personal things, very open things. So everybody's encouraged to be as vulnerable as they want to be. And we support each other. So there's a beauty in the group supporting each other. Of course, the horses, I could gush on and on about what the horse do. We do it over 4 sessions because there's too much emotion in one session. You couldn't have a workshop for a day and deal with, I don't even care what kind of grief it is. It could be
too much to process, right?
Too much to process. And I like people to have a week in between to process, and a little bit of takeaways and things to bring back. And then we move through it. And then once it's done, then, you know, and some of them do come back for one-on-one sessions, because some people want to work through things just on their own. And so that can happen as well. But it's a way to get started. And actually the last workshop I did, the women in that workshop are in contact with each other now. So then you're building community around it. And that's the other thing about grief is, and this, in this case, I will talk about grief more as it relates to bereavement, because in that group of women, it was all around death. They feel freely able to talk to each other about how they're feeling about, you know, the death of in all their cases, it was of a loved one. And there's community around that, and talking about it is so important, because in Western culture, we don't deal with death very well. You know, people die, we have, you know, you have a wake, you know, you get together.
As soon as possible. That's
right. And then you go back to work and you're not over your grief yet. Haven't you gone through the 5 stages yet? It's like ridiculous how we deal with it. Whereas in other cultures, I mean, first of all, death isn't considered the end. It's embraced. And the ceremony, there's so much more ceremony around it, and there's so much more communication around it. I think we need to get over that. So us in our little way with the horses and these small groups of people, they create community around each other as well to support each other, right? Because they're on similar journeys, and because they've shared things over a month's period, they become very close. It's incredibly close. So yeah, it's really quite beautiful.
Now, I'd just like to point out that this is in-person sessions, so you're only about a half an hour from the Ottawa International Airport, just saying. And Merrickville is a beautiful place to come and visit. But you also have workshops that are just for a weekend as well coming up.
That's right.
So they're more like just like a getting to know yourself weekend, and getting to see maybe your issues are on the surface, so you can delve in later on, maybe.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, I mean, I do all sorts of things. I mean, you asked about, the grief stuff. That's how we manage specifically grief. Most of my workshops are more relatively general. I am geared mostly to women. I mean, I just tend to attract women. It's not saying I don't work with men. I'm delighted to work with men, but I tend to attract women. So my workshops tend to be more curated to women, and they're more about like the workshop, or let's say the retreat. So I have a retreat coming up the beginning of May. It's a 2-day retreat. And what it is, it's all about resetting and rejuvenating body and your spirit. The horses are a central theme to that, but it's all around tapping into your body and into your energy. So at these retreats, we do work with the horses, and sometimes stuff comes up because everybody's lives have stuff in them. Somebody could come to a retreat and they're in a state of grief because they've lost somebody, right? So maybe someone has died and they want to get away and go to a retreat, or they're divorced and I need to get whatever. So all of these emotions and energy work is exactly the same because it comes up with the horses. So that's the backbone. But because we're doing energy work and doing stuff with the body is so healing for everything, we encompass other, what I would call somatic things within it. So yoga is, we usually have a couple of yoga classes on our 2-day retreats. Our last one we did, and we're going to do it again, we encompass, Reiki sessions, which is where you come in so people can have a Reiki session. We encompass walks in nature, or forest bathing activity, where you can go out in nature and meditate and be quiet and be through a forest bathing experience. And then at the very end of the 2-day retreat, we express ourselves through creatively with art. So I have a local artist that comes in and does a workshop, and you create something, and creating things gets you in your body too, right? And so you're making things with your hands, and we end it with that because there's an output, and you can take whatever the creation is. I'm not sure what we're making this time, but it's something from nature, and then you take it away, and these are really beautiful things, and the energy you've put into the 2 days is encompassed in the thing you make. So it's quite beautiful. And we have accommodations for the retreat. So you come for 2 days, we feed you. And for those that want accommodations, this time we're offering a retreat with overnight accommodations, the people that want to just be totally immersed into it for 2 days. And then we have an option if people just want to come for the 2 days, and if they're local and say they don't want to have the overnight accommodations, we're going to do that this year. So that'll enable us to expand it to, a few more people, but we don't make it very big. I would never have in this kind of thing any more than 8 people.
Yeah, I mean that's part of the joy of it too, right?
That's right.
Making small and accessible that way.
That's right.
And so, Feel organization, is that an international organization? Is that like in the States as well as or different parts of the world as well?
Yeah. So Feel I would consider is a global organization, but it's headquartered in Canada. The people that started it are outside of Toronto in the Newmarket area, and the place is called Horse Spirit Connection. So they started it. But what I can say, it's Wendy Golding. Now, Wendy has since passed away, and her partner, Andre Lacaptu. He's now running it since Wendy is gone. It was born out of a program called Epona Quest, which is an American program run by Linda Kahanov. So Linda Kahanov, if anybody follows this kind of work, is one of the forerunners in this work. She's written many books, beautiful, called The Tao of Equus, Riding Between the Worlds, and she was one of the very early adopters and understanding of working with horses on an energetic and very spiritual level. So she's been running programs for a long time. And so Andre and Wendy study under her. And so what they did was and this is probably, if Andre's listening to this, he may have to correct me, but I think about 15 years ago. And Wendy took the complete program, and then Andre came on board with it as well. And what they did was they took her program and teachings and then adapted it for themselves. So it's very much based on that. And they have field practitioners all over the world. To get trained in it, you can get trained in Canada in 2 places, in BC and in outside of Toronto. In the rest of the world, there's a place, a field training facility in Sweden. You can get trained there. And there is something going on in South Africa. I'm not sure if you can get trained in South Africa, but there are people practicing there. And there are a lot of practitioners as well around the world. Most of them in North America, quite a few, because you can get trained in Sweden as well. And then pockets as well, all over the place. And there are lots of programs in this work now. It's really becoming, I wouldn't say it's mainstream, it's not, but people know about it more. There are more people doing it. And there are lots of organizations that offer these kind of programs. And some people will often ask me, what differentiates the field program from these other programs that are offered. And there are two major differences. Maybe 3. So one of the big differences is we really don't run away from emotions. We get trained into emotions, what the emotions mean, how to manage emotions, and how to facilitate emotions with clients. Not from a therapeutic or therapist perspective. Again, I want to stress that I'm not a therapist, but we work with emotions because they come up and you can't ignore them, right? So we deal right with the emotions. So there's the emotional component is quite a bit different. Some of the other programs they won't, and I won't get into why not. I mean, there's pros and cons, right? So there I would say that we manage and deal with emotions and understand them very, very well. We spend a lot of time training in the emotions. The second difference is there is a stronger spiritual component to feel than some of the other programs. So I talked a little bit about, there's a lot of science behind this, but there's a lot of spiritual tapping into behind it as well. So Andre, who is our leader, is trained in and a student of shamanic practices. So he has done a lot of studying there, and we do bring in some of those kinds of practices that help us get in touch with the spiritual component. The energy of spirits around us, horse ancestors and horse spirits around us, and we spend time tapping into that as well. And it's part of the program. I took the advanced program this year, and the advanced program is 4 days. It's all about that. And that's when you tap into things like, well, it's indigenous knowledge. It's really, people will say it's woo-woo. No, it's what the world has known forever, right? We just, we just replaced it with, other things, like.
I know, like science and spirituality, like.
Right. They're all connected. It's just that.
I think science came out of spirituality because all of a sudden people didn't just believe because someone told them. Now we have to prove it.
But there is we talk about knowing in a felt sense. We all have it. And some people are more gifted or more practiced. We all have it. So we don't ignore that. And because we don't ignore that, and we pay attention to it, the experiences, it's just another layer that we can tap into. Like, I've had things happen with horses that you would not be able to explain, right? So, but it's that, and the horses tap into it too. I mean, the horses are spiritual beings, and so they tap into it too. So there is that we're trained in. Now, do we use it all in our practices? Not always. I always use it, but it's not always evident because I have to respect my clients.
Yeah, that's right.
Some people don't want me to talk about that, and even though I know the spirit horse hanging around, I'm not going to say it because some people will think I've lost my mind. But the reality is, it's the result and the profound experience. It doesn't matter. So we tap into that. We don't ignore it, and I don't think any other programs do that. The Epona Quest, where Linda, if you read her book, she's very much tapped into that. That's the second big difference in the program. And the third thing I would say, it's really comprehensive. So it's a 6-month program. So there's many programs out there you can take at minimum, there's a couple out there that you can take, and then you go off to practice. And then, there's more commonly ones that are like 5 days. And they're hands-on. I'd be a little bit concerned about things that weren't hands-on because it's an experience. I don't think you can do this stuff virtually. You can do some things virtually, for sure, but certainly the hands-on stuff you can't. And so, and in those cases, and there's nothing wrong with these programs. I'm not trying to say that, but they're not as comprehensive and as involved. And you have to wonder. When you go out and work in the field, I mean, do you have the depth and breadth? So our program, 6 months, 3 different sessions of a week apiece where you're actually physically at the campus at Horse Spirit Connections where you do the training. Very intense, lots of homework, practicums you have to do and complete. It's like taking a university course. You can't graduate from the program until you can complete all the modules. And they include spending 2 days on psychotherapy, even though we're not therapists, to understand what it is. And hey, if you've got a client that escalates, what do? You need to know what to do because it can happen, right? So it's much more comprehensive and much more layered and much more involved. And I'm not saying that's better or worse. It's just the difference. It's just the difference in the program. And so those are the big those are the big differences between it and some of the others that are out there.
Oh, it's very cool. Very cool. I have my neighbor is very interested in getting involved in this at one point in time, so we'll have to see if she does this. It's awesome. Well, I have taken a class over at Off Farm class and off your farm, and it was super enlightening and interesting, and I really enjoyed my time there that day when we did the little workshop across the road. And it's been a great journey and a great eye opener, and it's like sometimes it connects because I've been in horses all my life and seeing, that makes total sense to me, all this stuff. It makes total sense being around horses and how much horses do communicate and to each other and how they're like I said, they do process grief. I know when I had to put my horse down, I made sure she got to say goodbye to her herd, and they were talking. Like they knew what was going on. There was no doubt in my mind, and they knew, and we let them have their grief beforehand because sometimes they just go away and they disappear, and then the horses are kind of, what's going on?
Yeah.
And I'm glad that they understand it because they are such a herd community that they understand grief maybe on a herd, like that knowledge is generational and that's how they carry it as well, I believe.
Oh, they do. You make an interesting point. It's the inherent knowledge of the herd, collective consciousness of all horses, alive and dead, right? If you're going to tap into the spiritual side of it, the horses that have gone, there's a consciousness there, and they're born with this consciousness. And so when a herd mate leaves or is getting ready to leave, they know. I mean, unless it's an accident, okay, accidents can happen, but if a horse is old and they're going, they know, and they have their own way of providing ceremony around it. And when we do what he can, we always involve the herd when a horse, we have, hopefully we can help the horse cross over, because a lot of times that's what happens. They get to a point where we assist them, and we involve the whole herd in the whole process so that they can process grieving and the loss themselves. And I've had some tremendous experiences around that recently, and we were talking about writing. I'm actually in the process of putting together it's more of a talk. It's a couple-hour talk on grief and horses, how horses grieve, and what we can do to help horses grieve and process of grief. So, as I was asked to do that, I was thinking, that might be a subject for another book because. And I'm just talking about my experiences. I talk to other people and they share some beautiful experiences of that. And it just shows you how spiritually connected they are as well, right? It's just amazing. So it's no wonder that when we're with them, and if we're awake and attune and paying attention, that if you tap into that, it's just beautiful. It really is.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. And I've put all Kathy's links in the information of the video notes. And if you have any questions, I'm sure you can email her and or check out her Facebook page or her web page, and I will direct you to all her socials. Anything else, Kathy, that you can think of that you want to share with us before we go?
No, I can't really think of anything. I mean, maybe generally, just comment. Don't ignore what you feel in your body. You know, that felt sense of that gut feeling or that heart sense. Pay attention to that. It's telling you something. I guess that would be a final message to people. We can, obviously I do the work with horses, but you can attune to that without horses too. So the more we are paying attention to that, I think the better we'll all be.
I think so. I really believe that we spend way too much time in our heads, and that never gets us anywhere. We have to really spend more time in our body and in the now moment, like horses and dogs and cats and all our pets. They spend it in the now. They're not thinking about tomorrow. They may be thinking about dinner time, but they're not thinking about tomorrow.
That's right.
So thanks so much. And
you're very welcome.
Thanks you everyone for being with us. Next week, Megan Downs, I hope, is here. She's coming from the UK and she's speaking to us. She's she's been mentored by Jackie Dennison, who is one of the rescue mediums, and she's been having some adventures with Jackie and working on her mediumship, speaking of other spirits in other worlds. And she's coming back to check in with us. She hasn't been on for a while either, and she's coming to tell us how things have been going with her and all her adventures this year. So I'm going to say goodbye to everybody, and next week I imagine Teresa will be on. Hopefully Bex will be here, and we'll be back to normal. But thank you so much for pitch hitting today, and I don't believe in coincidences. This was meant for people who needed to hear. And thank you, Kathy.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me.
Thanks.